What if I told you that everything we've been taught about power and love is wrong? We live in a world that screams that money is the ultimate prize, that wealth is the final answer. But what if the most valuable treasure isn't locked away in a billionaire's vault, but found in the heart of someone the world has made invisible? This is a story that challenges that very belief. It's for anyone who has ever felt overlooked, undervalued, or believed that their circumstances define their worth. Today, we delve into a story where a poor maid finds forbidden love with a billionaire heir, proving that true connection is something money can't buy. We have Julia Stewart, a woman with nothing but her dignity, moving like a ghost through the lavish halls of a world that refuses to see her. And then we have Adam Simmons, the heir to a massive fortune, a man who seemingly has everything but is trapped in a gilded cage of loneliness and expectation. Their worlds were never meant to collide, but a stolen moment, a heartfelt connection that defies all logic, ignites a love that could cost them everything. But just as this impossible love story begins, it's threatened by the most shocking twist imaginable. Because what happens when that first secret kiss is discovered? The story doesn't just stop there, because seconds later, his twin walks in. Gasps. This isn't just a love story, it's a battle for the soul against the corrupting influence of wealth and power. It's about finding strength in the face of humiliation and choosing love against all odds. Before we dive into this incredible story of secrets, destiny, and redemption, tell me, from which beautiful city are you watching right now? I want to know how far our story has reached. And of course, don't forget to like this video, follow our channel so you don't miss what happens next, and share this with someone who you know will be touched by this story. Well, you know how some moments just hang in the air, thick with a kind of magic nobody can explain? This was one of them. In the grand silent library of the Simmons estate, where books held more secrets than the family itself, something shifted. It wasn't planned, of course. It was a forbidden love waiting for a spark. Julia Stewart, a poor maid who usually moved through these opulent rooms like a ghost, found herself locked in the gaze of the one man she was meant to avoid at all costs, the billionaire heir, Adam Simmons. It was a connection that defied logic, a silent conversation between two lonely souls. For a split second, the world outside that library ceased to exist. There was no rich versus poor divide, no cold expectations, only the raw, undeniable pull between them. Adam, a man who had everything but felt nothing, saw a universe of warmth in Julia's eyes, a stark contrast to the transactional relationships he endured. This quiet love story was beginning to write its first dangerous chapter. He reached out, his fingers gently brushing her cheek, a touch that was both a question and an answer. It was a gesture of pure emotional vulnerability he hadn't shown anyone. Had been having a hell of a time, you see, trapped in a life that wasn't his own choosing. But with Julia, it felt different. It felt real. The air crackled with a secret energy, a silent understanding that they were crossing a line from which there was no return. This wasn't just about an heir and a maid. It was about two people finding a sanctuary in each other's presence. Adam Simmons leaned in, and the distance that had separated their worlds collapsed into a single breathtaking point. Destiny, it seemed, had its own plans. The kiss was soft, yet it carried the weight of 1,000 unspoken words. It was a moment of pure redemption from their lonely lives, a promise of something more. For Julia, who had only known hardship and had often felt humiliated by her station, it was a validation she never knew she needed. For Adam, it was a taste of freedom, a rebellion against the gilded cage he was born into. It was a perfect, stolen piece of time. But perfection, as you know, is a fragile thing, and their private universe was about to be shattered in the most shocking twist imaginable. In that very instant, the heavy library door creaked open. The moment was so intense, they didn't hear it at first. But then, a sharp, audible gasp cut through the silence like a knife. The sound was filled with so much disbelief and accusation that it physically pushed them apart. Both their heads snapped towards the source of the sound, their hearts pounding in their chests. What they saw would trigger a chain of events that no one could have predicted, a plot twist that would test the very limits of their newfound connection. Standing in the doorway, his face a mirror image of Adam's but twisted into a mask of pure shock, was Ethan, Adam's identical twin brother. His eyes were wide, his mouth agape, and in that one look, Julia Stewart and Adam Simmons knew their beautiful, dangerous secret was no longer their own. The gasp echoed in the silence, a prelude to the storm that was about to break over the Simmons estate. The bubble had burst, and the cold reality came rushing back in, more threatening than ever before. Before that fateful kiss, life for Julia Stewart was a completely different story. It was a cycle of silent, tireless work inside the opulent Simmons estate, a world she belonged to but could never be a part of. She was for all intents and purposes invisible. A poor maid in a palace, her presence was as expected and as ignored as the polished silver or the dust-free furniture. The Simmons family, a dynasty built on cold ambition, moved around her without a glance. This stark rich versus poor reality was her everyday existence, a constant, quiet reminder of her place in their world. The worst, in a way, was Adam Simmons. Before he truly saw her, the billionaire heir looked straight through her. To him, she was just another part of the background, a cog in the massive machine that kept his gilded world running smoothly. He'd walk past her, discussing million-dollar deals on his phone, his face a mask of indifference. Julia often felt humiliated not by overt cruelty, but by this profound lack of acknowledgement. It was as if she were a ghost, haunting the halls of the living, a silent witness to a life she could never touch. Her days were a blur of chores, each one performed with a meticulous care that went completely unnoticed. She knew every secret of the house, which floorboard creaked, which window let in the best morning light, the faint scent of old paper in the library. She knew the family's routines, their casual cruelties, and their deep-seated unhappiness. This secret knowledge was her constant companion in the lonely corridors. It was a strange kind of power, this intimacy born from invisibility, but it offered little comfort in her solitary life. Shed watched the family dramas unfold from the sidelines, a silent observer to their hollow laughter and veiled insults. She saw the immense pressure they placed on Adam, grooming him to be the perfect heir, devoid of any real emotion. This love story was nowhere in sight, yet there was only a vast empty space between them, an ocean of class and expectation. Julia carried on with her duties, her own dreams tucked away like folded linens, neat and out of sight. Her spirit, however, remained unbroken, a quiet flame in the cold draft of the mansion. It's a funny thing about being invisible, though. You learn to see what others miss. While they saw a maid, Julia saw the cracks in their perfect facade. She saw the loneliness in Adam's eyes when he thought no one was looking. She saw the desperation behind his mother's brittle smile. Her position as a poor maid gave her a unique vantage point on the emptiness that wealth couldn't fill. She wasn't just polishing silver, she was witnessing the slow decay of souls starved of genuine connection. And so she moved through her days, a quiet storm of dignity and grace, utterly unseen. But how long can a person remain in the shadows, especially when their destiny is about to collide with the very person who refuses to see them? The universe was conspiring, setting the stage for a surprise that would force Adam Simmons to finally open his eyes and see the woman who had been there all along, holding a quiet strength he couldn't even imagine. Now let's flip the coin and look at Adam's side of this story. From the outside, the billionaire heir had it all. The money, the power, the pedigree, and a future that was mapped out for him since birth. But inside that gilded cage, Adam Simmons, was suffocating. He was a prisoner of his own life, bound by the iron chains of family expectation. Every decision, from his career path to his choice of friends, was dictated by the cold logic of the Simmons dynasty. He was playing a role, and the performance was draining his very soul. His engagement was the pinnacle of this charade. He was betrothed to a woman from an equally powerful family, a strategic merger of fortunes disguised as a union of hearts. He didn't love her, in fact, he barely liked her. Their conversations were hollow, their time together a series of public appearances designed to project an image of stability and power. This was the opposite of a love story. It was a business transaction, and he was the prime asset being traded. He felt utterly and completely alone, even when surrounded by a crowd. You see, the immense pressure of being the heir was a constant weight on his shoulders. He was expected to be ruthless in business, charming in society, and loyal to a family code that valued profit over people. There was no room for vulnerability, no space for the emotional man who hid beneath the tailored suits. He longed for something real, a connection that wasn't tied to his net worth. This deep-seated loneliness made his billionaire status feel more like a curse than a blessing, a fortress that kept everyone and everything genuine out. He moved through his days on autopilot, the ghost of his late mother's warmth, a distant memory. She had been the only one who saw him, the real Adam. Now there was no one. The family he had, including his ambitious twin brother, Ethan, only saw him as a means to an end. This profound isolation was his darkest secret. He yearned for a redemption from this empty existence, a way to break free and find a life that was truly his own. But he saw no way out. The path had been paved for him in gold, and deviating from it seemed impossible. The stark contrast between his life and the quiet dignity he would soon notice in someone like Julia Stewart was a plot twist waiting to happen. He was surrounded by the epitome of wealth, yet he was the poorest man in the room when it came to happiness. The rich versus poor dynamic wasn't just about money, it was about the wealth of spirit, and he was bankrupt. He was a man standing on top of the world, shouting into a void, and hearing nothing but the echo of his own loneliness. It's in this state of quiet desperation that a person is most vulnerable to a surprise, to a crack of light in their self-imposed darkness. Adam was at a breaking point, though he didn't know it yet. He was primed for a change, for a disruption to the monotonous script of his life. All it would take was one small, unexpected event to shake the foundations of his world and make him question everything he thought he knew about power, wealth, and the true meaning of value. Picture this: a lavish party at the Simmons estate. The air is thick with expensive perfume and the murmur of powerful people making powerful deals. And right in the middle of it all, a moment of pure, unadulterated cruelty. Adam's fiancée, a woman as beautiful as she was venomous, deliberately spills a glass of red wine. Not on the floor, but directly onto the pristine white apron of Julia Stewart, the poor maid who was simply trying to do her job. The music seemed to dip as a small circle of silence formed around them. The act was designed for one purpose: public humiliation. "Oh, you clumsy girl," the fiancée said, her voice dripping with false sympathy that was sharper than any insult. "You should watch where you're going." It was a classic power play, a stark and ugly display of the rich versus poor hierarchy for all to see. Julia, with wine soaking through her uniform, was suddenly the center of attention, humiliated in front of the very people who never gave her a second glance. Her face flushed, but she didn't say a word, her eyes fixed on the floor. From across the room, Adam watched the whole thing unfold. Had seen his fiancée pull stunts like this before, casual acts of cruelty to those she considered beneath her. Normally, he would have ignored it, another unpleasant but necessary part of his world. But tonight was different. As he looked at Julia, he expected to see tears, or perhaps a flash of anger. Instead, What he saw was a surprise that cut through his cynical haze. Julia Stewart simply stood there, absorbing the insult with a quiet, unshakable dignity. She didn't apologize or cower. She simply met the fiancé's gaze for a brief second, then knelt to pick up the fallen glass, her movements calm and deliberate. In that moment, she wasn't just a maid, she was a woman of incredible strength. Adam was struck by it, truly and deeply. He saw a depth of character that no amount of money could buy. This was an emotional jolt to his system, a plot twist in his perception of the world. He suddenly felt a surge of shame, not for Julia, but for himself, for being part of this ugly spectacle. This was the first time he truly saw Julia Stewart, not as staff, but as a person. The heir to a billionaire fortune found himself mesmerized by the quiet grace of a woman who had nothing. It was a shocking twist in his own heart. He saw more strength in her silence than in all the loud, boastful conversations happening around him. Their love story hadn't begun, but the seed of respect, a far more crucial element, had just been planted in most unlikely of circumstances. He felt an unfamiliar urge to intervene, to defend her. But before he could move, Julia had already diffused the situation with her silent composure, retreating to the kitchens to deal with the mess. The party moved on, the moment forgotten by everyone except Adam. He couldn't shake the image of her quiet dignity from his mind. It was a secret revelation, a quiet redemption from his own apathy. For the first time, he began to wonder about the poor maid who moved so silently through his home. What other secrets did she hold? A few days later, destiny decided to play its hand in a very direct way. While cleaning Adam's private study, a room usually off-limits, Julia Stewart found a leather-bound folder tucked carelessly between a cushion and the arm of a sofa. Recognizing the Simmons family crest, she opened it. Inside were not just business documents, but highly sensitive papers related to a major corporate merger, very deal that was causing the billionaire heir so much stress. She knew, instantly, that these papers in the wrong hands could ruin him. For a moment, the poor maid held the power to upend the rich versus poor dynamic completely. She could sell them. She could leak them to the press and watch the Simmons empire crumble. It was a tempting thought, a flash of vengeance for every moment she had felt invisible, for every time she was humiliated. This was a secret worth millions, a ticket out of her life of servitude. The power to create a shocking twist in the lives of those who never even knew her name was right there, in her hands. But that wasn't who Julia was. Her integrity was not for sale. Instead of plotting, she did something else. She read the documents, not just the words, but what was between the lines. Drawing on the quiet observations she had made over the years, listening to snippets of conversations she wasn't supposed to hear, she noticed a fatal flaw in the proposal. A small detail about a foreign competitor that everyone, including Adam's high-paid advisors, had overlooked. It was a detail that could turn the entire merger into a financial catastrophe. With her heart pounding, she took a monumental risk. She waited for Adam in the hallway, holding the folder. When he appeared, looking stressed and distracted, she didn't just hand it to him. "Mr. Simmons," she began, her voice steady despite her fear. "I found this in your study. I apologize for looking, but I believe there's a serious miscalculation regarding the overseas asset valuation on page 12. It was a bold move, a plot twist he never saw coming from the woman who cleaned his floors. Adam was about to dismiss her, annoyed at the intrusion. But her words stopped him cold. He snatched the folder, his eyes scanning the page she mentioned. A wave of surprise washed over his face, followed by dawning horror, and then, slowly, sheer astonishment. She was right. The poor maid who he barely knew existed had just saved him from a mistake that would have cost him and his family billions. It was an emotional gut punch that left him speechless. She hadn't just returned his documents, she'd offered a brilliant insight. He looked at her then, truly looked at her, and saw not a servant, but an intelligent, perceptive woman. This was a moment of redemption, not for her, but for his own prejudice. He was the powerful billionaire heir, and she was the one who had saved him. The irony was staggering. He couldn't understand her. Why didn't she use this against him? This act of profound integrity was a secret key that had just unlocked a door in his mind, and he knew, with absolute certainty, that he had to understand the woman standing before him. The incident with the documents was a complete game-changer. Adam Simmons, the billionaire heir, couldn't get Julia out of his mind. He was utterly baffled. In his world, information was a weapon, and loyalty was a commodity to be bought and sold. Yet this poor maid, who had every reason to resent him and his family, had chosen honesty. This surprise act of integrity was a puzzle he felt compelled to solve. He started finding excuses to be wherever she was, a complete reversal of his previous behavior. No longer was she invisible to him. He'd seek her out in the gardens or the library, ostensibly to ask a trivial question, but really just to talk to her. Their first few conversations were awkward, a clumsy dance across the vast rich versus poor divide. But Julia spoke with a simple, direct honesty that was like a breath of fresh air to Adam. She didn't flatter him or fear him. She just talked to him, like he was a person, not a title. It was a plot twist in his daily routine. These conversations became his secret escape. With his family, every word was a strategic move, a carefully constructed piece of a larger game. With his fiancée, it was all superficial chatter about society events. But with Julia, he could talk about things that mattered. He found himself confessing his frustrations with the business, his feeling of being trapped. She wouldn't offer solutions, but she would listen with a deep, emotional intelligence that made him feel truly heard for the first time in years. This burgeoning connection was the start of their real love story, though neither of them would have called it that. It was a story built not on grand gestures, but on quiet moments of shared humanity. He learned about her simple dream of one day owning a small bookshop. She learned about his hidden passion for astronomy, a passion his father had dismissed as a useless distraction for an heir. They were building a bridge, one conversation at a time, over the chasm that was supposed to keep them apart. He began to see the world through her eyes, noticing the small details she pointed out: the way the light hit the fountain at dawn, the resilience of a wildflower growing in the cracks of the pavement. These conversations felt more real and nourishing than any multi-million-dollar negotiation. For Adam, it was a slow-burn redemption from his cynical view of the world. He was discovering that the greatest treasures weren't locked in a vault, but could be found in a simple, honest conversation with a woman he was once too blind to see. Of course, they had to be careful. A billionaire spending his time in deep conversation with a maid was a scandal waiting to happen, especially with his manipulative twin brother, Ethan, always lurking. Their talks were always stolen moments, brief but profound. But a fire had been lit. Adam was no longer just confused by her integrity, he was drawn to it, captivated by it. And he was starting to realize that the person he felt most connected to in the entire world was the one person he absolutely couldn't have. The bridge between them wasn't just built on words, it was fortified by small, simple acts of kindness from Julia. These weren't grand gestures, but tiny, significant details that showed she saw the man, not the billionaire. One afternoon, Adam walked into his study to find a single perfect gardenia in a small vase on his desk. It was his late mother's favorite flower, a secret detail he thought everyone, including his own family, had forgotten. He knew, without having to ask, that it was Julia's doing. This simple act was a plot twist in his emotional landscape. It undid him in a way no business failure or family argument ever could. It was a message that said, "I see you. I remember what you loved." In the cold, transactional world of the Simmons family, such a purely emotional gesture was unheard of. It cracked the icy exterior he had so carefully constructed around his heart. He felt a warmth spread through him, a feeling he hadn't experienced since he was a boy, and it all came from a poor maid. Julia's kindnesses were like that, quiet, perceptive, and deeply personal. She would ask about the constellations Had mentioned, her genuine curiosity a stark surprise to him. No one had ever asked about his passions. To his family, he was an heir to Julia. He was Adam, the man who loved stars. These moments chipped away at the wall he had built, revealing the vulnerable person hiding behind the title. Their unlikely love story was being nurtured by these gentle, unassuming acts. The rich versus poor divide began to feel less like a chasm and more like an irrelevant detail. What did money matter when someone could offer you a piece of your own forgotten past? What was a stock portfolio compared to the feeling of being truly seen? Adam started to realize that Julia possessed a form of wealth he had never known, a richness of heart and spirit. Her kindness was a quiet form of redemption, healing wounds he didn't even know he had. He was becoming addicted to her presence. Of course, this growing bond was a dangerous secret. He was an engaged man. She was a member of his staff. A forbidden love was blooming in the shadows of the estate, a love that could destroy them both if it ever came to light. The risk was immense, but the pull was undeniable. Every kind word from Julia, every thoughtful gesture, made it harder for him to return to his cold, prescripted life. He was changing, and she was the catalyst. He found himself looking for her, his eyes scanning every room she entered, hoping for a shared glance or a brief smile. The world his father had built for him was starting to lose its color, while the world he was discovering with Julia was bursting with vibrant life. The icy air was melting, and he was terrified and thrilled by it. He knew he was approaching a point of no return, where a simple kindness would no longer be enough. It was no longer just about respect or curiosity. Adam Simmons was, to his own profound surprise, falling in love. It wasn't a sudden, dramatic event, but a slow, undeniable dawning in his heart. Every conversation, every shared secret, every quiet kindness from Julia Stewart solidified the truth. He was falling for the poor maid. He was falling for her quiet strength, her unwavering integrity, and the genuine warmth that radiated from her, a warmth his billionaire status could never, ever purchase. He would watch her from a distance, seeing how she treated the other staff with the same respect and kindness she showed him. He saw her share her lunch with a struggling gardener. He saw her comfort a young homesick kitchen hand. This wasn't a performance for his benefit, this was who she was. He realized her character had a depth that made the socialites he was surrounded by seem shallow and hollow by comparison. This was the real plot-twisted discovery of true value in a place he was taught to overlook. The rich versus poor narrative that had defined his entire life began to crumble. He saw that he was the one who was truly poor, impoverished in spirit and genuine connection. Julia, who had nothing in a material sense, was the richest person he had ever met. This dawning realization was a deeply emotional experience for the heir who thought he had everything. His feelings for her were becoming the most important secret of his life, a truth more valuable than his entire inheritance. He started imagining a different life, a different destiny, a life where he wasn't just the Simmons heir, but simply Adam. A life where his days were filled with the quiet joy he felt when he was with Julia, not the crushing weight of expectation. This burgeoning love story was becoming his everything, his private rebellion against a world that tried to own him. He was starting to believe that a future with her might be the only redemption he could ever hope for. He compared her to his fiancée, and the difference was staggering. His fiancée saw him as a prize, a stepping stone to more power. Julia saw him as a person, with flaws and passions and a hidden loneliness. The love he felt for Julia wasn't just a fleeting infatuation. It felt like coming home. It was a forbidden love, yes, but it was also the only true thing in his life. The risk of a shocking twist if they were discovered was enormous, but the thought of living without her was becoming unbearable. He knew he had to do something. He couldn't keep living this lie, torn between two worlds. The feelings he had for Julia were too powerful to be kept in the shadows forever. He was the cold, calculating billionaire who was now being guided by nothing but his heart. He had to know if she felt the same way. He had to bridge that final gap between them, regardless of the consequences. He decided to arrange a meeting, a moment where they could finally speak the truth. The library. It had to be the library. It was where their story had truly begun, the place where that first unspoken connection had sparked. Adam arranged a secret meeting with a coded note, left on a book he knew she would be reshelving. His heart hammered in his chest. The billionaire heir, used to commanding boardrooms, was now as nervous as a schoolboy. This felt more important than any merger, more significant than any deal. This was about his life, his real life, and it all hinged on this one clandestine meeting. When Julia slipped into the dimly lit room, her expression a mixture of fear and anticipation, the air grew thick with unspoken emotion. The world outside faded away, leaving just the two of them, surrounded by stories of the past, about to create their own. This forbidden love was reaching its boiling point. Adam didn't waste time with pretenses. He poured his heart out, confessing the crushing loneliness he felt, the immense pressure of being the heir, the gilded cage that was his life. He told her how her kindness had been a lifeline, how her integrity had been a surprise that reawakened his faith in people. "With you," he said, his voice raw and emotional, "I feel like I can breathe." It was a confession that tore down the last wall between them. The rich versus poor divide vanished, replaced by the universal truth of two people finding solace in one another. Julia listened, her eyes shining with unshed tears, seeing the broken man behind the powerful facade. It was her own moment of redemption. From seeing him as just a part of the family that ignored her, she, in turn, confessed her own fears, her own feelings of being trapped by her circumstances. It was a conversation of two souls meeting on equal ground, a true love story unfolding in the shadows. He saw her not as a poor maid, but as his equal in every way that mattered. Her quiet strength was the anchor he had been searching for his entire life. Destiny had brought them here, to this moment of absolute truth, and there was only one way it could end. As he finished speaking, a profound silence filled the room. He stepped closer, and the space between them crackled with electricity. He saw the answer in her eyes before she said a word. This was the real plot twist, not that he loved her, but that she, against all odds, might love him back. He leaned in slowly, giving her every chance to pull away. She didn't. The kiss that followed was nothing like the first. It was deeper, filled with the weight of their confessions, a heartfelt seal on their secret love. It was a perfect, stolen moment of connection, a promise of a future they both desperately wanted, but had no idea how to achieve. It was everything. A moment of pure, unadulterated joy that felt like it could last forever. But forever, as they were about to be brutally reminded, is a very fleeting thing. Their private world, built on whispered confessions and a stolen kiss, was about to be invaded in the most shocking twist possible. In the world of high-stakes drama, timing is everything. And for Adam and Julia, their timing couldn't have been worse. Just as their lips met in that profound, world-altering kiss, a kiss that sealed their forbidden love, the universe delivered its most cruel plot twist. The heavy library door, which they had thought securely closed, swung open without a sound. For a breathtaking second, their secret remained safe, wrapped in the warm glow of the library lamps and the intensity of their embrace. But then came the sound. It wasn't a shout or a word. It was a sharp theatrical gasp, a sound of pure, unadulterated shock that shattered the sacred silence. It was a sound designed to be heard, to announce a discovery. The emotional high of their perfect moment came crashing down, replaced by a freezing dread. They sprang apart as if electrocuted, their heads whipping towards the doorway. The beautiful love story they were writing had just had its most precious page ripped out before their eyes. Standing there was Ethan Simmons, Adam's identical twin. He looked exactly like Adam, yet he was his perfect opposite. His expression wasn't one of simple surprise, but of malicious triumph. His eyes, cold and calculating, darted from his brother's horrified face to the poor maid's terrified one. A slow, cruel smile began to play on his lips. He had them. He had caught the perfect billionaire heir in the ultimate act of indiscretion. This was the leverage he had always dreamed of. The gasp echoed, seeming to hang in the air forever. For Julia, it was the sound of her world ending. She felt humiliated, exposed, and terrifyingly vulnerable. For Adam, the shock was quickly replaced by a hot surge of protective fury. He instinctively moved to stand slightly in front of Julia, shielding her from his brother's predatory gaze. The rich versus poor dynamic had never been more apparent, as Ethan's eyes dismissed Julia as nothing more than a scandalous pawn in his game. This was the shocking twist that changed everything. Their love was no longer a beautiful, private secret. It was now a weapon, and it was in the hands of the one person Adam knew would not hesitate to use it. Ethan's mind was already racing, calculating the angles, seeing how he could use this information to his advantage. The silent standoff in the library was charged with unspoken threats. The love between Adam and Julia now pitted against the ambition of a ruthless twin. The moment was a nightmare come to life. The man who looked just like the man Julia was falling for was now her greatest threat. And Adam, the heir who was just beginning to find his own strength, was now faced with an impossible choice. He could see the coming storm in his brother's eyes, and he knew this discovery wasn't just a random accident. It was destiny of the cruelest kind, forcing a confrontation that would set in motion a battle for love, loyalty, and the future of the Simmons empire. The silence in the library didn't last long. It was broken by Ethan's low, mocking chuckle. Well, he drawled, his eyes gleaming with malice as he looked at the heir and the poor maid. What a cozy little scene. A real-life fairy tale, isn't it? The prince and the pauper. Or should I say, the billionaire and the help. Each word was a calculated jab, designed to humiliate Julia and enrage Adam. Ethan, the scheming twin, knew exactly which buttons to push. He closed the door behind him, trapping them in the room with his toxic presence. He laid out his threat with the cold precision of a surgeon. A vital family merger, one that the Simmons dynasty had been working on for years, was at a critical stage. It depended on the family presenting a united, scandal-free front. Imagine, Ethan mused, what our partners would think if they discovered the golden heir was having a sordid affair with the staff. A forbidden love like this, it would be a disaster. His threat wasn't just about business. It was deeply personal and cruel. He turned his attention to Julia, his gaze stripping her of all dignity. "And you," he said, his voice dropping to a venomous whisper, "think of your reputation. A homewrecker. A gold digger. The tabloids would have a field day. The girl who seduced the engaged billionaire. You'd be humiliated and ruined. You'd never find work in this city again." He was weaponizing their secret, turning their beautiful love story into something ugly and transactional. Adam felt a surge of rage so powerful it almost blinded him. This was the ultimate plot twist in his relationship with his brother. He had always known Ethan was ambitious and manipulative, but this level of cruelty was a shocking twist. Ethan was demanding the impossible, that Adam break off the only real and emotional connection he had ever had, or else he would burn everything to the ground. He was using their love as blackmail, a pawn in his own power games within the family. The choice was a nightmare: On one hand, his duty as the heir, the family legacy, and the potential ruin of a woman he was falling in love with. On the other, the redemption and happiness he had just begun to find. Ethan was forcing him to choose between his gilded cage and his heart. The rich versus poor chasm was being weaponized, with Julia positioned as the unacceptable collateral damage in a war between two powerful brothers. Adam looked at Julia, saw the fear and despair in her eyes, and knew that his brother had miscalculated. Ethan thought he was threatening Adam with the loss of his status and fortune. But what Ethan didn't understand, what he couldn't possibly comprehend, was that Adam's destiny was no longer tied to the Simmons empire. It was tied to the woman standing beside him. Ethan thought he was cornering a predictable businessman, but he was about to face a man who had finally found something worth fighting for. In that tense, suffocating library, something inside Adam Simmons snapped. It wasn't the sound of defeat. It was the sound of a chain breaking. He looked at his smug twin brother, then at Julia's pale, frightened face, and a profound clarity washed over him. For his entire life, he had bent to the will of his family, sacrificing his own happiness for their cold, calculated business dealings. But no more. This was his moment of redemption. His loyalty had found a new home. "You're done, Ethan," Adam said, his voice dangerously quiet, but filled with an authority his brother had never heard before. It wasn't the voice of the dutiful heir. It was the voice of a man. "You will not threaten her. You will not speak to her again. This has nothing to do with the merger, and everything to do with your own pathetic jealousy." This was a plot twist Ethan hadn't anticipated. He expected his brother to crumble, to negotiate, to choose the billionaire life. He didn't expect him to fight back. For the first time, Adam was standing up not for his title or his inheritance, but for a person. For Julia, he realized in that moment that his family's loyalty was a conditional, transactional thing. Julia's quiet strength and integrity, however, were real. His love story with her was more valuable than any corporate alliance. The forbidden love that Ethan saw as a weakness was actually Adam's greatest strength. It had given him the courage to finally defy his toxic family. Ethan was taken aback, a flicker of surprise crossing his features before being replaced by a sneer. "Brave words," he mocked. "Are you really willing to throw everything away for a poor maid to choose her over us?" The rich versus poor insult was meant to sting, to remind Adam of the world he was leaving behind. But the words had lost their power over Adam. He no longer saw Julia as a maid, he saw her as his future. "This isn't about choosing her over you," Adam retorted, stepping forward. "This is about choosing integrity over corruption. It's about choosing a real emotional connection over the hollow shell of a life you all want for me. So yes, I choose her." The declaration hung in the air, a shocking twist to the power dynamic that had governed their lives. The heir was renouncing the unspoken rules of the dynasty. He was protecting his secret love, not by hiding it, but by defending it openly. He turned to Julia and took her hand, his grip firm and reassuring. It was a simple, public gesture, but it was an act of war against his brother. He was making it clear that they were a unit now. Ethan, seeing his initial threat had backfired, narrowed his eyes. He realized he had underestimated Adam's feelings. But a cornered snake is a dangerous one. As Adam led Julia from the room, Ethan's mind was already churning, plotting a new, more vicious way to destroy them. The battle was far from over, it had just begun. Ethan, stewing in his defeat, was not one to give up. If he couldn't break them apart with threats, he would do it with treachery. His new plan was as cruel as it was simple: frame Julia for a crime she didn't commit. He chose his weapon carefully, a priceless sapphire necklace that had belonged to their grandmother, a famous family heirloom. It was a symbol of the Simmons legacy, and its theft would be an unforgivable sin, guaranteed to get the poor maid fired. and possibly even arrested. The perfect plot twist to end this inconvenient love story. He waited for a day when he knew Julia would be cleaning his mother's old suite. With practiced stealth, he slipped the necklace into the pocket of the worn coat she kept in the staff locker room. It was a despicable act, designed to humiliate her in the most public way possible. Painting her as the common thief the family always suspected a person of her class to be. He then raised the alarm, feigning panic and outrage, declaring the heirloom stolen. The rich versus poor narrative was his weapon, and he wielded it with vicious precision. The entire household was thrown into chaos. The staff were lined up and questioned, their belongings searched. It was a humiliating ordeal for everyone, but the focus, as Ethan intended, quickly fell on Julia. When the necklace was inevitably discovered in her coat pocket, the accusation was instant and absolute. The family, except for Adam, looked at her with cold contempt. Here was the proof they needed. The poor maid had shown her true colors. It was a shocking twist, confirming all their worst prejudices, but Adam had been waiting for this. He was no longer the naive, trusting heir. His confrontation with his twin had taught him the depths of his brother's treachery. Anticipating that Ethan would try something like this, Adam had taken a secret precaution. Days earlier, he had a tiny state-of-the-art security camera installed in the hallway overlooking the staff lockers. It was a move born of a desperate need to protect the woman he loved, a gambit to catch the real snake in his own trap. As the family matriarch prepared to call the police and ruin Julia's life forever, Adam stepped forward, his face calm and composed. "Before you make that call," he said, his voice cutting through the tense atmosphere, "I think there's something you all need to see." He held up his phone, a look of grim redemption in his eyes. He had known his brother would not stop, and he had prepared for this very moment. He was about to turn Ethan's own wicked plot twist against him. The surprise on Ethan's face was a picture of dawning horror. He had been so sure of his victory, so certain of his cleverness. He had no idea that his every move had been recorded, that his perfect frame-up was about to unravel before the very people he sought to impress. Adam was about to expose his brother's deceit, and in doing so, prove Julia's unwavering honesty once and for all. The destiny of everyone in that room was about to be rewritten by a few seconds of video footage. With the entire Simmons clan gathered, their faces a mixture of accusation and morbid curiosity, Adam pressed play. The screen of the large television in the drawing room flickered to life, showing the grainy but clear footage from the hidden camera. The room fell silent, the only sound the faint whir of the air conditioning. Julia stood to the side, her heart pounding, her fate hanging in the balance. This was the ultimate plot twist, and she had no idea what was about to unfold. The video showed Ethan, the supposedly grieving grandson, looking furtively down the hall before slipping into the staff area. The family watched, mesmerized, as the footage showed their golden boy opening Julia's locker and planting the heirloom in her coat. The gasp that went through the room was far more profound than the one Ethan had let out in the library. It was a gasp of genuine, horrified surprise. The heir was not the victim, he was the villain. The poor maid was not the thief, she was the target. Ethan's face turned ashen. He was exposed, his treachery laid bare for everyone to see. There was no explanation, no way to spin this. The video was irrefutable proof of his deceit. He had tried to humiliate Julia, to use the rich versus poor divide to destroy her, and instead, he had only humiliated himself. The shocking twist was that the rot in the family wasn't coming from the outside, it was coming from within, from one of their own. His manipulative secret was out. Adam stood by Julia's side, a silent guardian. He didn't gloat or say, "I told you." So, he simply let the truth speak for itself. He watched as his father's face hardened with disappointment and his mother's filled with shame. They were finally seeing their son, their precious twin, for who he truly was. More importantly, they were seeing Julia for who she was, a woman of unwavering honesty, even when faced with the ultimate betrayal. Her character shone brightly against the darkness of Ethan's actions. This was a moment of profound emotional redemption for Julia. Her name was cleared in the most dramatic way possible. The accusations and contemptuous looks were replaced by stunned silence and reluctant respect. She had endured the suspicion and the shame with the same quiet dignity she always had, and now her integrity was undeniable. The love story between her and Adam had been tested by fire, and it had emerged stronger and purer than before. The footage ended, plunging the room back into a heavy silence. The power dynamic in the Simmons family had been irrevocably altered. Adam was no longer just a dutiful heir, he was a man of conviction and strength, willing to defy his family for what was right. And Ethan, the scheming twin, was now a pariah in his own home. The family was forced to confront a truth they had long ignored about the poison in their ranks, all because of a forbidden love they had tried so hard to crush. In the aftermath of the shocking revelation, a profound quiet settled over the Simmons estate. The immediate drama was over, but the reverberations were just beginning. As Adam looked at Julia, who stood there, vindicated and strong, he had a moment of crystal-clear realization. It wasn't just his love for her that had driven him to install that camera, it was her love, her influence, that had given him the very strength to do it. Her unwavering character had become his own moral compass. He realized that for years he had been a passenger in his own life, steered by his family's toxic control and ambition. He was the billionaire heir, but he had no power over his own destiny. Meeting Julia, falling for her, and fighting for her had been his true redemption. She had handed him the key to his own cage, not by telling him what to do, but by showing him what a person of true worth looked like. Her love had been the ultimate plot twist in his own character development. This love story was never just a romance, it was a revolution. It was a quiet rebellion that had grown into an open declaration of independence. Standing up to Ethan, exposing the truth in front of his entire family, these were things the old Adam Simmons would have never dared to do. He would have handled it quietly, managed the problem, and maintained the fragile peace. But Julia's simple, honest love had taught him that some things, like truth and dignity, are worth fighting for, no matter the cost. He looked at his family's disappointed father, his shamed mother, his disgraced twin. He felt not anger, but a strange sense of pity. They were all still trapped in the same gilded cage he had just broken out of. They were slaves to their wealth, their status, their public image. The rich versus poor dynamic they so fiercely upheld was actually a prison that kept them from experiencing anything real or emotional. They had all the money in the world, but they were bankrupt in spirit. The forbidden love that his family saw as a liability had, in fact, been his salvation. It gave him the courage to be his own man. The heir was finally ready to inherit something far more valuable than a fortune. He was ready to inherit himself. The secret to his freedom wasn't in a bank vault or a stock portfolio. It was in the heart of a poor maid who had shown him the meaning of unconditional love and integrity. He knew then what he had to do next. The battle against Ethan was won, but the war for his own soul was not yet over. There was one final step to take, one ultimate declaration to make. He couldn't justify his family's expectations, he had to shatter them completely. He had to prove, not just to them but to himself, that the man he was becoming was no longer for sale. The stage was set for one final shocking twist. The climax of this incredible love story wasn't a quiet affair. It happened at the annual Simmons Charity Gala, the pinnacle of the city's social calendar. The press was there, the city's elite were there, and the entire Simmons family was there, trying to project an image of unity after the recent secret turmoil. Adam was expected to take the stage and deliver a speech as the future leader of the dynasty, the dutiful billionaire heir, and he did take the stage. But the speech he gave was not the one anyone expected. In a shocking twist that sent murmurs rippling through the opulent ballroom, Adam calmly and clearly rejected his inheritance. "For my entire life," he began, his voice steady and strong, "I have been defined by my last name and my family's fortune. But tonight, I want to define myself by something else. By love. By integrity. By truth." He looked out into the crowd, his eyes finding Julia, who was watching from the wings, her heart in her throat. This was the ultimate plot twist. He publicly declared his love for Julia Stewart, the poor maid his family had tried to humiliate and discard. He told the entire world that she had taught him the meaning of wealth, a wealth of character that no bank could ever hold. "I am choosing her," he declared, his voice ringing with emotional conviction. "I am choosing her. Kindness over billions. I am choosing her heart over a dynasty. Because her true worth is the greatest treasure I could ever find." It was a stunning public redemption, not just for him, but for the very idea of love over money. The fallout was immediate and spectacular. His father's face was a mask of thunderous fury. His twin brother, Ethan, looked on with utter disbelief. The socialites and business partners were speechless. The heir to the Simmons fortune was walking away from it all, for love. It was a story that defied all logic in their world, a forbidden love that had triumphed over the most powerful forces of wealth and expectation. The rich versus poor narrative had been turned on its head completely. Adam walked off the stage, leaving a sea of shocked faces behind him, and went directly to Julia. He took her in his arms, right there in front of everyone, and kissed her. It wasn't a stolen secret kiss in a library. It was a proud, public declaration. It was the beginning of their new life, a life they would build together, based not on what they had, but on who they were. Their destiny, it turned out, was not to rule an empire, but to create a world of their own. In the end, this wasn't just a story about a billionaire and a maid. It was a story about breaking free, about finding your own voice, and about discovering that the greatest riches in life are the ones that can't be counted. Adam Simmons gave up a fortune, but he gained a universe. He chose love, and in doing so he found himself. And that was the most valuable inheritance of all. And so, our story comes to a close. What a journey it has been, right? From a secret, stolen kiss in a library to a stunning public declaration that chose love over billions. This story was always about more than just a forbidden love between a poor maid and a billionaire heir. It was about the radical idea that our true worth isn't measured by our bank accounts, but by our character, our integrity, and our capacity for kindness. It's a testament to the fact that true redemption comes from breaking free and choosing your own destiny. Now I have to ask you, what part of this emotional journey impacted you the most? Was it the moment Adam saw Julia's dignity in the face of humiliation? Or was it when he exposed his own twin brother's treachery to protect her? I'd love to read your thoughts in the comments below. Did you expect a different ending? Or did you love the shocking twist of Adam giving it all up for love? Let's talk about it. If this story touched your heart, please give this video a like. It truly helps us know what kind of stories you connect with. And if you haven't already, make sure to follow the channel so you don't miss out on our next story. We have plenty of older videos for you to explore, each with its own plot twist. Thank you for spending this time with us, and we can't wait to see you in the next video.